Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the second talk in a series of only two talks from South Oxfordshire District Council and Vale of Whitehorse District Council on waste and recycling. This is part of National Recycling Week. For those of you that joined us on Tuesday, you will have seen sort of how to use each of your bins. And today we're just going to cover what happens to the waste that you put into your bins. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question, you'll be able to see on the right hand side of your screen there is a Q&A box. Feel free to type a question in there and it will either be answered by my colleague Alex, who is monitoring the box throughout the talk, or at the end we'll have a little bit of time for questions and I will try and answer them as best I can. If you do think of any other questions that we don't get round to, or you think of it afterwards, do feel free to email them over to us at the waste team, and we can get back to you that way. Just so you know, this is being recorded so that we can put it on our websites and our YouTube channel. But we can't see any of you, none of your names are in it. We can't obviously see your faces and your microphones are muted. So you should all be able to see my screen, which is the presentation. And once we've got through this presentation, you will see my face when we answer the questions. All right then, so let's see if it's going to work. All right, so what happens to your food waste? So this is your small green bin. That you will have an inside caddy and then your outdoor food bin. So your food waste is taken down to a facility in Wallingford, and that is an anaerobic digestion plant. It looks like this. You may have seen it if you've ever driven through Wallingford. And when the food waste gets there, it is macerated up and mixed with water to make a food waste soup. That looks a bit like this, sort of like a slurry. Obviously, prior to this, all the plastics are removed by the technologies there. So that's the liners that you use to put your food waste in. That food waste soup is then pasteurized and it is pumped into these 5 large tanks that you can see there. That is then heated to 37 degrees, which is obviously body temperature, and it is stirred for 85 days. Obviously 37 degrees is body temperature, so these tanks basically mimic the human stomach, so that food will digest, hence the name anaerobic digestion. As this food waste breaks down, it releases gases, particularly methane, and that methane is captured and converted into electricity. So obviously this process is anaerobic, which means that it doesn't have any added oxygen. It doesn't sort of require the addition of extra oxygen for the food waste to break down, which is why we can't accept any compostable or biodegradable packaging in our food waste bins, because those materials do not break down anaerobically. They need oxygen to break down. Obviously, we do accept compostable liners because they are removed prior to the food waste being pumped into the tanks. So by using anaerobic digestion to manage our food waste, we actually generate enough power for approximately 4,800 homes. And also at the end of the 85 days, that food waste is removed from the tanks, and it's actually a very nutrient-rich fertilizer that's sold on to local farmers. So, food waste is a really great way of recycling your waste, because it has 100% of the contents of your food waste become something else, and actually they become 2 things, because they do become electricity and they also become this great fertilizer. All right, so onto garden waste. Obviously not everybody will have a garden waste bin. That's a brown bin. That is a paid for subscription that you can pay for online if you don't have one, so go to our websites for that. But yes, so your garden waste goes into the brown bin and it becomes compost. It gets composted in a more conventional manner, obviously, than sort of the food waste. It goes onto large outdoor piles, and they're called open windrows. And despite popular belief, they don't actually smell, and they look like this. And because the reason that they don't smell is that we only accept garden waste. So that's only, natural things from your garden. We don't accept any food waste in there. Anything that's sort of come from your kitchen, basically. It's completely sort of organic and clean. Again, as they're outdoors, this is why we can't accept any compostable packaging or products in your garden waste bin, because it does present a litter risk. It's sort of, the site is bordered by farmland, and we wouldn't want that to get littered onto there. And also that compost is sold on to local farmers as well. So if there was any sort of plastics or papers or not completely composted products in there, that would then be spread on the fields, and again would be a litter risk. We've also historically given our residents an opportunity to take the compost back at our annual compost giveaway. Obviously, due to COVID, that has been postponed. Well, cancelled this year. It didn't happen, and we're not sure sort of when that will reopen next year. Like many things at the moment. All right, so that's your garden waste, and then your general waste, which is the contents of your grey bin. So everything that's not recyclable, they're taken to an energy recovery facility up in Ardleigh. That looks like this. Again, you will have recognised this, I'm sure, if you've ever driven north of Oxford. It looks a bit like a spaceship. But the refuse, the general waste that is taken there, is incinerated. And by sort of capturing the heat that comes off that waste, obviously rubbish burns very, very hot. It's also very flammable, and we can capture that heat and convert it into electricity, and that actually generates enough power for over 60,000 homes across Oxfordshire. So that's obviously a fantastic way of getting rid of general waste that may have previously gone to landfill. And by choosing to incinerate our general waste, we've actually diverted 95% of our waste from landfill. Only about 5% of the waste that we collect still goes to landfill. And for those of you that weren't in my previous talk, we don't use landfill. Many local authorities avoid it due to the high taxes that are now associated with using landfill to get rid of waste. When we talk about incineration at our talks that we do or historically have done, we do get quite a few questions about emissions. Now, the emissions that come off this waste are scrubbed using a huge amount of technology. And there is obviously a lot of tough legislation and monitoring by DEFRA and the Environment Agency, and there's sort of an upper limit to the emissions that can be released, and if the facility goes over that limit, they are fined massively. So obviously they keep it well below that upper limit, and to make sure that the emissions are as clean as possible. And then once the burning is complete, we are left with sort of some metals that haven't burnt, and they're sent to specialist recycling facilities, and the ash is used in construction, particularly in road construction. So again, obviously it's quite obvious that this is much more favourable to landfill as a method for getting rid of your general waste. All right, and recycling, theme of the day, of the week. Your recycling is sent down to a material recycling facility in Edmonton and London. Obviously, we collect our recycling mixed recycling in a green bin. Before it does get down to London, it's actually taken to our transfer station up in Culham, where there are a team of people that have to go through it by hand and pick out anything that's just obviously shouldn't be there. So that's the black bags, the food, the textiles. But, there's only sort of 4 or 5 of them. And on our collection days, this is coming in almost constantly. So there's only so much that they can do before it is actually packaged up into huge HGVs and driven down to London. When it gets to London, it's tipped out again, and they scan that recycling almost metre by metre for a percentage of contamination. So that's obviously things that should not be there. If that contamination rate is too high, they will not accept the recycling, and it has to get loaded back onto the huge HGVs and is sent away to be incinerated. So it's really, really important that you actually, make sure that you're putting the right thing in your bin, because that entire HGV can be, streets of recycling, an entire collection round that will end up being incinerated just because a few people have made mistakes and put in the wrong things. However, if the recycling is clean Then it is loaded onto conveyor belts, and there are another team of people that take out the remaining stuff that shouldn't be there. And yeah, so they put them into sort of bins, separate it off. That conveyor belt continues going along, and it vibrates, which shakes off the paper and cardboard. It then passes underneath a magnet, which takes out the metals. It is then scanned with infrared technology, and it picks up exactly where the plastics are on that belt. And then as it goes sort of over an edge and the plastics were to fall, there are blasts of air that send it off into separate places. And then obviously you are left with the glass. All the materials are then obviously separated so they can be processed. So plastics are melted down and the dyes are removed and they're turned into pellets. Paper is baled up. And then all those different materials could be sent on to be, remanufactured into brand new products, both nationally and overseas. Okay, so again, I think a very common question that we get asked is about where our recycling goes. There's been a lot of negative media attention on recycling ending up where it shouldn't be. For example, bags in fields over in Asia, and as I mentioned, it is treated both nationally and internationally. But I think the most important thing to note here is that recycling is a commodity. It's worth something. We get an economic boost from that. It has an economic value. So we are selling a product to someone. Somebody is buying this product. So to just dump it sort of in a field is, effectively dumping money. However, we do have to report our end destination data to DEFRA quarterly. That is available to the public to see using Waste Data Flow. And if you go onto our website, you'll find instructions on how to use that website if you want to have a look yourself. And this is the most recent data that's been sort of published for the public. So that's for 2018 and 19. And you can see that all of our recycling remained within the UK or Europe. Obviously, some of the companies that we are selling onto are maybe brokers, so that might get resold. But as far as we're aware, and to our knowledge, this is where they go. The international market is essential for the UK because we don't have the technologies to recycle products ourselves currently. Hopefully, this will obviously be changing, particularly with COVID. Sort of putting restrictions on international markets. A lot of plastic goes to China, and again, people don't seem to like that. There is sort of a negative connotations with sending our plastics over to China, but China's actually got very high standards on the plastics that they accept. So, and a lot of, if not all of the plastic products that we use that are recycled do come back from China. Some of you may remember at the beginning of lockdown, there was a shortage of hand sanitizer. And actually the issue with that wasn't necessarily the hand sanitizer itself. It was that there was a shortage of plastic bottles because obviously all exports from China were locked down, and we couldn't actually access plastic bottles for the hand sanitizer being made in this country. But yeah, end destination data does also vary month by month. Depending on supply and demand, and so it's not always necessarily to the same company or the same country. Month by month, that can change depending on where the market is. All right. And also, if you're thinking about what you can sort of do at home, obviously the easiest way, the easiest thing that springs to mind is home composting. So that's obviously for some of your food waste. And it's a really good way to turn leftover fruit and vegetables into your own nutrient-rich fertilizer. It can only be sort of fruit and vegetables. You can't make sure that you're not putting on any meat products or bones or anything like that. Not only can it attract vermin, but it can actually be quite detrimental to the soil because of the sort of microbes that are in meat products. So if you are home composting, you want a good level of both green and brown waste. So brown waste is things like toilet rolls, and the ratio should be 2:1 green to brown. If you get that ratio wrong, it can sort of go a bit sludgy and not very good. I can see my colleague smiling because I know that she's had this problem at home. But yes, so you can do that obviously using a compost bin or a heap, a bit like a mini version of what we saw in previous slides for the garden waste that we process. A bin obviously keeps it enclosed. It can, if you are a bit worried about smell or vermin, bin might be the way to go. If you have the space for a heap, maybe behind a shed if you've got a larger garden, it's an either or really. So the whole process of it breaking down to become compost takes about 3 to 6 months. So it can be a slightly longer process. So it's always good to get started now, ready for next year. You can also try grass cycling, which is the process of basically mowing your lawn and leaving the grass cuttings where they are. So you take the bit of your lawnmower off that catches that grass and leave it on your lawn, and it's actually sort of it's basically a way of composting directly onto your lawn, and that has its own benefits that we'll go into on the next slide. So there you go, you've got nice photos here of someone using a compost bin, and then on the right hand side is what the compost will hopefully look like at the end of the 6-month process. All right, so the benefits of both home composting and grass cycling. So it provides essential nutrients to plants and soil, and that includes nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. And a lot of gardeners actually call compost black gold because it can really boost sort of the growth going on in your garden and in your little plant and your seedlings. It can also improve the soil structure and biodiversity in your garden. So obviously worms are very essential for composting, and they will break down soil themselves, and the happier and healthier your soil, the more worms and other little mini beasts in your soil that really sort of boost the soil health effectively. And it can also help with your soil pH and moisture levels, which means you can actually then save on water because less watering is required. Compost can hold quite a lot of moisture within it as well. And the same goes for grass cycling, particularly. That holds a lot of moisture, so it means that you need to water your lawn less. And of course, it's an all-natural way of processing your waste. And if you do want any more information on home composting and getting compost bins, feel free to visit the Replenish Oxfordshire website. So that's all about it. They've got loads of information on the website for how to do it at home, and like I say, where to actually get bins from. Okay, and now we're going to try a video, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it and I'll be able to get it to play, which is just a recap of sort of what we covered in the last talk, if you missed it, and today as well. So let's go for it.
We believe that small changes can make a big difference, and you should too. By implementing the need to recycle into your everyday life, you are not only helping your community, but also making an environmental impact on a global level. For example, every ton of recycled newspaper saves up to 17 trees. The Green Recycling Bin. Recycling is simple, and it can all be done from your own front doorstep. The different materials are separated at a recycling facility in North London, where they are sorted out and sent on to other companies for further recycling. But before you put anything in the bin, please make sure it's either loose or in a clear sack. The items you can put into your green recycling bin include paper and card, steel and aluminium food and drink cans, aluminium foil, plastic bottles, food trays, yogurt pots and tubs, glass bottles and jars, aerosol cans, and cartons and other Tetra Paks. On the other hand, there are certain items that cannot be recycled in the green bin. These include black bin liners, nappies, food, crisp and sweet wrappers, tissues, cling film, plant pots and trays, toys, wood, and medicine packaging. If your bin has any of these things in, we won't empty it. You can even recycle batteries. Just make sure they're in a clear bag on top of your bins. Put textiles in a tied carrier next to your bin. The food waste bin. There have been some changes to how we collect your food waste. You can now use plastic carrier bags to line your small green food caddy. Your food waste is collected once a week alongside your green recycling or grey refuse bin. The waste is taken to the food recycling plant in Crowmarsh, where it is pulverised into a soup and separated from the carrier bags.
The soup is then put into giant tanks where it is stirred and heated, creating methane, which is used to create electricity. The broken down food can also be used as a rich organic fertiliser.
The whole process takes 120 days, and the plant in Crowmarsh creates nearly enough electricity to power a town the size of Wallingford and Radley put together. You can put all kinds of food into the food bin, from the scraps off your plate to the bones and tea bags, but we don't want any packaging of any sort. The grey refuse bin. All of the refuse from your grey bin no longer goes to landfill. Instead, the waste is burnt in a special facility to produce electricity. In fact, enough electricity is produced to power 38,000 homes across Oxfordshire. Despite this, it is still really important that recyclable materials are removed from general waste so that we can reuse as much of these materials as possible and reduce the need to use more raw materials. Any small electrical items can also be recycled at the curbside. Just pop them in a carrier bag next to your grey refuse bin on collection day and we'll handle the rest. You can also request a garden waste bin to recycle grass cuttings, hedge trimmings and dead flowers throughout the summer and autumn months. We can also collect large items from the curbside, like televisions, furniture and large appliances. For more information on extra services and recycling tips, visit morerecycling.co.uk.
Okay, sorry about that slight technical difficulty. I was trying to get rid of a notification on my computer. Oh no, there we go. Okay, so we'll go to questions now. I don't actually know if there are any in the Q&A box, but no, it doesn't look like there is. So hopefully everybody found that informative. Like I say, if you have got any questions, feel free to email waste.team@southernvale.gov.uk. And thank you very much for attending this talk. And yes, keep recycling. Thank you.